Masterpiece. Chapter 24, Fate and Fortitude. Marvin plummeted headlong through space for several long seconds. Thump! He crashed in the floor of the gallery, rolled twice, and came to a halt. Fortunately, the room's low-piled gray carpet softened his landing. He was a little dazed, but none the worse for wear. Shoe-clad feet milled around him, and James' blue sneakers were fast disappearing in the distance. He knew it was suicide to linger out in the open. He crawled as fast as he could to the wall and waited near the scuffed baseboard. Marvin had to make his way to the drawing, but it seemed too risky to climb the wall when so many people were looking at the pictures. He knew that his black shell would be hard to miss once he started the trek across the expansive wall. Though his stomach clenched over the danger facing Dora's drawing, he decided there was nothing to do but wait till the gallery cleared out. In the flurry of closing, he hoped he could make his way to Fortitude unnoticed before the FBI agent did. The evening passed quickly. To take his mind off his fears, Marvin occupied himself with people watching, which was one of his favorite pastimes anyway. He counted the different types of shoes that strolled past his hiding place. 12 black loafers, 6 brown loafers, 4 stilettos, 8 black lace-up shoes, 6 pumps, 4 hiking boots, 8 dress boots, 11 sneakers, and 1 cast. He tried to predict how long people would linger in front of the pictures based on their type of shoe. The pumps and loafers, black loafers, won, with the hiking boots a close second. The sneakers were divided between those who stayed longer than anyone, college students, Marvin decided, and those who rushed off with barely a glance, children. After a couple hours of this, Marvin was starving. The floor was disappointingly free of litter, probably due to the museum's prohibitions on food and drink. But a few minutes later, a woman walked by pushing a stroller, and Marvin was delighted to see a Cheerio tumble off her toddler's lap. He studied the movements of the crowd thoroughly before making a mad dash to retrieve it. Then, just as he and Lane did at home, he wedged his head and forelegs through the hole in the Cheerio, pushed off with his rear legs, and sent it rolling like a hoop toward the baseboard, whisking him to safety. When he reached the edge of the carpet, he extricated himself and settled down to dine. The Cheerio was a little stale, but sweet and crunchy nonetheless. A very satisfying evening meal. Finally, the speaker system chimed, and a woman's voice echoed through the gallery. "The museum will be closing in 15 minutes. Please proceed to the exits now." Marvin hesitated only a moment, making sure that people were really turning to leave, then scurried up the wall as fast as he could. When he reached the corner of the Fortitude's wooden frame, he paused just long enough to look at the drawing, admiring the delicacy of lines that weren't his own. Then he ducked out of sight behind the lower left corner of the frame. He didn't have long to wait. A moment later, he heard swift footsteps approach the drawing, then felt the picture being lifted from the wall. He held fast as the frame was shoved hastily into some kind of canvas bag, pitch black inside. Marvin could see nothing but dark fabric all around him. He looked up, and through the narrow opening at the top, he caught sight of thick fingers gripping the handle. The knuckles were sparsely covered with hair. The bag swayed and bounced for a few minutes. Then, with a gentle thud, it stopped. This must be the supply closet, Marvin realized. He heard the rustle of cloth and inched up the side of the frame. The darkness of the closet was no impediment to Marvin, who was well used to navigating at night. He could see a short, stocky man moving quickly and confidently, casting aside a navy blue guard uniform. Suddenly, the frame was snatched from the canvas bag and laid face down. Marvin had to reposition himself on his side, flattening his body. He'd forgotten this part of Christina's plan. The frame was about to be disassembled. He had to keep out of sight. He heard the clip-clip of wire cutters removing the hanging apparatus. A knife flashed above him, perilously close. He shrunk away from the blade that glided expertly through the backing of the picture in a crisp rectangle. Marvin prayed he wouldn't be knocked off. The next few minutes were critical. If he got bumped or shaken loose, or worse yet, if the man saw him and swatted him away, who could say where Fortitude would end up? He heard the tear of paper. Abruptly, a penlight flashed in the darkness, sending a narrow white beam onto the back of the picture. Marvin dodged out of sight, terrified. Now he could see the man, his forehead creased in concentration. He had dark hair and an otherwise bland appearance. He could be anyone, Marvin thought, probably an advantage for an undercover FBI agent. The man grunted, tearing off the rest of the backing until Marvin saw the pale matting. Just as the man was about to lift the drawing from the frame, Marvin leapt onto the matting. It felt firm beneath his legs. When he peered over the edge, he saw the yellowed, ancient paper that was surely the reverse of Durer's masterpiece. He could smell it, too, the musty scent of centuries. Holding the matting gingerly with one hand, the man set down the penlight. Marvin cowered out of sight, watching him remove something tiny and silver from his inside pocket. It must be the microchip, he realized. The man lifted the matting and turned it quickly and expertly, making a small cut with his knife, while Marvin hugged the edge. It was like surgery, Marvin thought, this delicate task of embedding the microchip in the side of the matting where it wouldn't be seen. After several minutes of manipulation, during which Marvin could hear the man's heavy, impatient breathing, the penlight clicked off. The microchip was in place. Marvin barely had time to secure himself against the back of the matting when a piece of something stiff was pressed against his shell. The drawing swung through the air and glided smoothly into a small, tight space. It must be the jacket pouch, Marvin realized. Fortitude was ready for its journey. It was completely dark inside the jacket, and even Marvin, who was very accustomed to small, dark places, felt a wave of claustrophobia. He remembered the time he and Elaine had gotten stuck in Mrs. Pompidet's eyeglass case when she snapped it shut one evening. How he panicked and pushed furtively against the felt walls, and Elaine had made fun of him for almost throwing up. Fortunately, Mrs. Pompidet had decided to watch a rerun of one of her shows, and it wasn't long before the case was opened again. Even more fortunately, she was so absorbed in the television that she didn't notice two shiny black beetles making their escape. Now Marvin felt the jacket sway with the movements of the owner. He could tell when the man left the closet, when he paused to make sure he hadn't been seen, when he strode through the hallway and tripped briskly down the museum's central staircase. Fragments of Cheerios sloshed uncomfortably in Marvin's stomach. Bouncing along against the man's warm, substantial chest, Marvin could hear the noises of the crowds through the thick cloth. He felt the change in temperature as they exited the Met into a chilly New York evening. A car door opened and slammed shut. The man mumbled an address to someone. Then Marvin heard the rapid beeps of a cell phone keypad. He strained to follow the conversation. "Yeah, it's done," the man said. "Nope, I'll be there in 20 minutes. What's the room number? Okay, see you then." This would be the first exchange, Marvin thought, but not the end point of the journey for the drawing. It was so hard to remember what was supposed to happen, and yet so important to do so. Marvin hunched fretfully in his spot, trying to concentrate with what seemed like cardboard pressing against him. First, the FBI agent was supposed to give the drawing to an intermediary. Wasn't that what Christina had told them? A contact in the underground art world. Then it would be handed off to the real thieves. The FBI must be tracking the drawing's path, right? Maybe everything would be okay. After all, the plan had been to follow the trail of the fake drawing and ultimately retrieve it. Marvin thought of Christina, of the dangers she'd mentioned, the chance that they'd never see his drawing again. He thought of James and his uncertainty when he looked at the drawing for the last time. Then suddenly, and in a flood of longing, he thought of Mama and Papa. A destination 20 minutes away would still be in the city. But what if the drawing was bound for someplace else? And what if Marvin was stuck here, its unwitting companion and helpless protector, unable to escape? He might never see his family again. The risk he had taken became shockingly clear. His fate and Fortitude's were one and the same. He shuddered, feeling the dull thrum of the car engine as it made its way through the busy, tired city. Chapter 25, The Middleman. Marvin felt the car stop. The man rustled out and strode a short distance, purposefully and without hesitation. Inside the dark pocket, Marvin tried to guess what was happening. The man had asked for a room number on the phone. Were they now in an office? A hotel? He could tell from the falling sensation in his stomach that they'd boarded an elevator. Then the motion stopped, and there were quick steps, followed by a muted knock. A new voice, muffled but terse, asked, "Do you have it?" Was this the go-between, ready to ferry the drawing to the real thieves? "In here. Show it to me." Marvin had no time to prepare. He tried to stay where he was, frozen, while the drawing was lifted from its protective sleeve. Just as Fortitude emerged into the bright light of the room, a lip of fabric caught Marvin's shell and knocked him from his perch. He grasped in vain for the edge of the matting, but missed. He found himself hurtling through the air, landing with a smack on the hard, smooth surface of a laminated table. Tucking his legs beneath him, Marvin held perfectly still, hoping he hadn't been seen. The wood surface was dark, fortunately. When he peeked around, he saw the bland decor of a hotel room, fully recognizable from all the soap operas he and Elaine had watched on television with his Mrs. Pompadie, dark carpeting, floral bedspread, simple, shiny furniture. The FBI agent had set the drawer drawing in the middle of the table, inches from Marvin. A thin, bearded man leaned over it with a magnifying glass, scrutinizing the details. For a minute, Marvin felt a jolt of fear, but then he remembered that this was the real drawing, not his forgery. It was sure to pass inspection. Neither man spoke. "Okay," the bearded man said finally. "I'll take it to my contact." "What about my share?" the FBI agent asked. "There, in the envelope." The bearded man gestured to a flat brown package on the nightstand, which the FBI agent promptly slipped into his suit pocket. The two men turned toward the door, and Marvin drew a deep breath. Here was his chance. He dashed across the expanse of the table in the direction of the drawing, but suddenly he heard a thump. A huge hand slapped the surface next to him, sweeping him off the table. He tumbled through the air and landed in a dense, woven forest of green carpeting. It smelled faintly like cigarettes. A shoe stamped the ground near him, then stamped again closer. Marvin raced for the shelter of the table leg. Far above him, he heard the FBI agent. "What is it?" "Some kind of beetle," the bearded man answered. "This thing better not be infested with bugs." "Nah, it's probably from the hotel. Bed bugs." "Not bed bugs?" Marvin stiffened with indignation. Humans are so ignorant. The thin man snorted in disgust, then followed the FBI agent to the door. As Marvin watched the FBI agent leave the room, his last link to the museum and James and safety, he felt truly alone.